God, I was having a horrible dream. It was quotation marks being used for dialogue. That's not real, is it? People don't actually do that. It's the second week of the Booker Shortlist, 1982. Last week, our two victims, candidates, ranged from good to only good for kindling. Will either of this week's books shake up the rankings, or will I have to dig a new basement so something can fit underneath Study for Obedience? I do wish there was some indication about which judge chose which book, which were given the 12 Angry Men treatment, and which only got in because one judge refused to buy their round if it was left out. The Booker judges come from such disparate angles, by design I'm sure, but it'd be nice to know if this is one of the poet's choices so I can ignore the story and take my time with the language, or if Robert Webb insisted this be on the list because the pages tasted like peanut butter. More than that though, it's worth keeping the judging process in mind when having a go at any of these books. This year there are 150 books up for consideration, with only as many days to consider them in. Then there's rereading and analysis and discussions.
We've just reached the end of chapter 2 and I can't for the life of me tell you what the hell's going on.
What I'm saying is, a book that the average reader might enjoy over the course of a month isn't the same book that a professor of Shakespeare will enjoy when it's his 9th he has to read that week. It's also why most of the books on this year's list are fairly short. 3 are under 200 pages, then there's only one that makes it into the 400s. Not that you'll hear me complaining. This week we're tackling 2 of the more medium-length candidates, starting with I'm always wary when a book claims to be something meets 1984. Yes, it was an important book with a lot to say about authoritarian governments, but has anyone actually read 1984? For every one interesting page, there are 5 of dry political theory. Thankfully, however, Prophet Song isn't much like 1984, nor is it much like its own blurb. With all the talk of a mother doing whatever it takes to reunite her family, I was expecting something like 1984 meets The Punisher, interesting though that might have been. The novel kicks off right after a controversial new political party is voted in. We follow Eilish Stack, doctor in biology and mother of 4, in the Republic of Ireland sometime around modern day. Soon, her husband, a trade union official, gets blackbagged, and society quickly descends into a fierce totalitarian state before her neighbourhood is consumed by civil war. She is indeed desperate to keep her family together, but it's more frenetic than that. Stack comes across as very human, intelligent, but never with enough information to make the right decisions. What the book does perfectly is the smooth fade from suburban family life with everyday worries, getting the kids to school, checking up on granddad, to shrapnel whizzing overhead as men with rifles drag away your children. One thing that a lot of dystopian novels of this sort get wrong is oversharing, but in Prophet Song, we never leave Stack's close third person, so we only ever know what she knows, and most often she knows nothing apart from rumours. Where's her husband being held? Where have her children gone? What's the best place to run to? It really captures the sheer confusion of crisis. The story would have been infinitely lesser if we'd understood how the party had taken control, where the prisoners were being taken, how the rebels are resisting, how it all shook out. It all goes towards making Stack's decisions seem reasonable, or at least understandable, even when they backfire with hideous consequences. I do have my quibbles. The style, for one thing. It's very Cormac McCarthy, and if I could offer one piece of advice to all writers everywhere, it would be this. Stop trying to be like Cormac McCarthy. His style worked for like 4 books at most. No one should ever try and replicate it. The action is told in a very clean prose, which I liked, but I could have done without the paragraphs waxing about the infinite machinations of the unending machine of fate, or whatever. For a second thing, I'd like to have had more specifics in the front end. The authoritarian party doesn't have much presence in themselves. There's no Big Brother, no Mussolini, no ideology or goal, just they're bad and, watch out. But like I said, those are just quibbles. Overall, it's a hearty recommend from me, especially if you're in the mood for a good punt in the feely bits. This Other Eden. God, that's an awkward title. But I can't fault it for accuracy. This Other Eden is a book about a sort of Eden that's a sort of idyllic sort of homeland for a few sort of families, which kept me sort of interested. It's a very sort of book. But let's start at the beginning. The No Not That Eden in question is Apple Island, a scrap of land just off the coast of the American state of Maine. Some light Googling reveals Apple Island is a fictionalized proxy for Malaga Island. The whole novel is in fact a fictionalised account of the very real brutalisation of the mixed-race community who inhabited the island from the end of the US Civil War up until their forcible eviction in 1911. But inspiration and content are not one and the same, and how does That Eden on Your Left fare in the reading? The short answer? The lesson that we learned from the Tattoos of Auschwitz is that interesting inspiration doesn't make up for poor storytelling. But that isn't the whole story here, because The Southerden actually has some very good storytelling, with some charming vignettes that really stuck with me. Had the whole book been of the same quality, it'd be getting a hearty recommendation wing up the nose. So where does the aforementioned ness come into it? Well, mainly in how these vignettes connect. Stop me if this sounds too technical, but a novel usually has characters, and that's where this additional Eden falls short. Earlier on, I mentioned that I wish I knew which judge suggested which book. I have a feeling this is one of the more poetry-inclined choices. One or two of the characters do stand out, but they don't have the space to grow or change in amongst the dozen of islanders in rags that the book tries to characterise. Not wishing to spoil, but both of today's books have a similar tragedy in the back half. In Prophet Song's case, it knocked the wind out of me, maybe put the book down for a breather, but in That Eden Behind You, I acknowledged, yes, this is a sad event, and moved on, wind still safely inside me. And it all comes down to the characters, or lack of same. Other than that, the writing is solid, and it feels well researched, not that I'm inclined to check. But at the end of the day, it was much too hit and miss to recommend. So, Larry, where do the rankings stand after today's tussle? No, you can't do joint second. Toss a coin or something. Okay, fine, that'll do. Stay tuned next week to find out if anything can steal Prophet Song's crown, or if I'm forced to let Study of Obedience out of the oubliette.